Hey, what's up guys? In this video, I'm going to be reacting to my old landscape photography. Now, before you click out of this video because you've seen those videos of photographers reacting to their old photography, I want to use this opportunity to teach you what I did wrong and how you can avoid the same mistakes in your own photography. Right after this. Hey, what's up guys, and welcome into the video. I'm David Johnston, and on this channel we talk landscape photography. So if you're new here, if you're into landscape photography at all, consider subscribing below. Now in this video specifically, like I said, I'm gonna be going through my old landscape photography. Now, a caveat here before we get started, I was really bad. I had a lot of confidence going into it, and I knew I could take the photographs, but I was unsure of really how to do that, and that came through in my photography. So I'm going to be showing you my old photography, how bad it was, and how you can avoid the same mistakes and really take that next step, a big leap in photography if you struggle from these same things. So I'm going to be sharing 5 photographs that we're going to be going through and really getting my reaction on how bad it was, and then showing you options that you can use to correct those issues moving forward in your photography. So here's photograph number 1. I have my computer down here. Let's look at this photograph of Middle Prong Trail in Great Smoky Mountains National Park. Holy reflections. Like, this is some intense reflection off the surface of the water. It's cool because it has like that pinkish hue to the water, but really, it just distracts everything. I wasn't using a circular polarizer. I didn't really know what I was doing with shutter speed. I knew I liked that milky look for waterfalls, but I didn't really know what shutter speed to use. The shutter speed is way too long. There's so much reflection. It's distracting all around. And I loved this photograph before it was actually used on some websites, on some articles I wrote. I don't know why. I don't know why they kept me writing articles with a photograph like this. It's too much going on. Simplifying everything would have made this a lot better. So here's an example of a photograph that I shot about 2 years later at the same waterfall, simplifying the entire scene, getting a good foreground, getting shapes into the scene, knowing what I was doing with shutter speed. This was shot at like 1/5 of a second. The other one was shot at like 5 seconds, really elongating that shutter speed. So knowing what you're doing moving forward, knowing what you're doing with shutter speed, knowing what you're doing with a circular polarizer, reflections, all that goes into it. Composition. If you're unsure about what to do with waterfall photography, I made this video that you can watch on how to shoot better waterfalls. Okay, here's photograph number 2. We're sticking in the Smokies here. This is like one of those photographs where you go out and you try to get that stacked mountain scene moving back. It's like that quintessential Smoky Mountain shot. And this one is just flat out bad. Like, I'm really embarrassed to show it right now. It is really, really bad. First of all, you have no detail in the mountains. You get some ridges going on. There was so much noise. I was shooting at an incredibly high ISO for the situation, and the color is just not realistic at all. Mountains are not that blue. This looks absolutely ridiculous, and I don't know what I was thinking going out and shooting this photograph. Here's an example of how to do it about 2 years later from Clingman's Dome parking lot in Great Smoky Mountains National Park. You have the ridges stacked back, you have colorization, you have detail in the mountains, you have the right colors moving back into where the sun was coming up on that morning. Using a longer shutter speed to get that detail in the mountains is what really corrected this, and not over editing the photograph to make it look fake. This one looks realistic, and those things helped me get the photograph that I wanted to get first, but I couldn't because I had no idea what I was doing. In the second one, I knew what I was doing with shutter speed. I knew what I was doing with editing too. All right, here's the third example of a photograph that I shot that was really, really bad. It was a long exposure photograph. I wanted to get swirls in the foreground of a photograph, or like long exposures of of bubbles moving out of a waterfall, because when you get a lot of energy hitting the water, a lot of times it'll elongate bubbles or any foam that's coming off of the waterfall. And I was trying to do that with this photograph in particular. I loved this photograph when I was first shooting, but looking back on it, the colorization, again, bad. Over editing a photograph, it has that like stupid red leaf right in the foreground that I like placed there. It looks so unnatural, so out of place. And this photograph is just compositionally, it's fine. It's not great, but it's fine. It's those things that I talked about previously, like the knowing your shutter speed, keeping a photograph natural, not placing random red leaves in your photograph. Here's an example of shooting it about 3 years later, a different waterfall, but the same concept. Knowing your shutter speed, again, this one was probably shot at like 3 seconds, but lowering the ISO enough to be able to elongate that shutter speed, and also shooting at something like f/16 allows me to really elongate that shutter speed, let in more light with my exposure time instead of ISO or aperture. So this example is way better. It's been featured in many articles that I've written all over the internet, so I was way happier with the second time around than the first time, but it's that failure of the first time that really led me to learn on what would look good and what I did wrong, that led me to the more successful photograph. All right, let's move to night photography for the last two examples. I've really gotten into night photography in the last few years, and it's just so fun going out and shooting a Milky Way photograph and then coming back and post-processing that. Here's an example of the first Milky Way that I ever shot. It's really bad. There's so much noise going on. The composition is terrible. Forcing a foreground in, like, this is that cliche photograph where you stand in the foreground and just look up at the sky with a headlamp on. It's been done tons. This is not good. I cut off the top part of the Milky Way. Overall, cool to get it the first time, but there's so much to be improved on. Here's an example of a Milky Way shot that I got last week in Florida on the Gulf of Mexico. Creative composition, the lighting is correct. Nobody's really done this composition before, so you think creatively about it, more creatively than standing in the foreground with a headlamp on your head. And then you have the right colorization and the right length of the Milky Way going through the photograph. This is a much more successful Milky Way shot because it's way more interesting. You have a lot more detail and concept to the photograph, and it's properly edited too, using the right ISO. All these things go into how to shoot a successful Milky Way photograph. And I recently did an entire playlist on how to shoot a Milky Way photograph from the planning all the way through to the editing. You can watch that playlist right here showing up on your screen. Now, the last example of a photograph that I shot and my reaction to it is, it used to be one of my favorite photographs. I'll throw that out there. And I still kind of like it, but planning out a star trail photograph takes a lot more than just showing up and shooting it. You have to plan where north is going to be, what kind of star trails you want. Do you want circular? Do you want straight? This is a photograph that I shot at Natchez Trace Bridge, trying to get that first star trail, and it was really, really cool. But there is discoloration. There are breaks in the star trails, which is like a huge no-no to get these perfectly right. And that was due to gaps in the exposures. Instead of shooting simultaneous shots, I was shooting one shot, noise reduction shot, one shot, noise reduction shot. And that creates gaps in your photograph. This is an example of a much better star trail shot that I shot about 3 years after that, knowing how to shoot simultaneous photographs, not using the noise reduction option in your camera while you're shooting in the field. But this is an example of how to do it the right way. Lining up the North Star in your composition, getting that right, creating an interesting photograph rather than just showing up, pointing your camera at the sky and really trying to just create any type of photograph. This shot is a much more thought out, much more compositionally sound photograph that I got in Lubec, Maine at West Quoddy Head Lighthouse. Now, I recently went back to the Natchez Trace to film a video and an instructional video on how to shoot star trails. You can watch that video right here that's showing up on your screen too. Now, showing these reaction videos of your bad photos is not to like try to bring you down. It's trying to teach you of what I did wrong and how you can improve that. Teach you that you can take these tips and you can take where you are right now as a photographer and really dissect your photographs and learn how to get better. It's always asking the question, why? Why is this photograph bad? Why is this photograph good? And how can I improve upon that? So next time you're out in the field, use these tips, think about your composition, your photograph, what the details are in it, and accentuate those, learning from my past mistakes so that you can be a better photographer yourself. So guys, that does it for this video. If you like this video, don't be shy, hit the thumbs up. Comment to the question of the day below, which is, what is your next photograph going to be? Go ahead and comment below with those. And as always, you can subscribe to this channel too for more landscape photography videos on how you can be a better landscape photographer. Continuing watching is always an option too. What I'm gonna do is share that Milky Way playlist again so that you can go out and create successful Milky Way images. You can watch that in this playlist right here, or you can watch what YouTube is suggesting that you watch based on your search terms. That video is going to be right here.